Need psychotherapy online or in person? Check out tinyurl.com/THT psychotherapy. The George Brassey podcast is made possible with funding provided from Brassey Global Strategies, LLC, a leading political consulting, public policy, government affairs, and research firm. Are you interested in running for elected office? Need advice? Call or email George, 708-769-5015. Brassey Global Strategies 1@gmail.com.
Snowstorm forces Chicago Heights to close City Hall. Snowstorm forces Chicago Heights to close City Hall, Chicago Heights, Illinois. Snow was on everybody's mind at Wednesday night's Chicago Heights City Council meeting. The Chicago area was hit by a major snowstorm, and Chicago Heights had about 10 inches of snow dumped on it Tuesday and Wednesday. City Hall was closed Wednesday afternoon because of the winter storm, and garbage pickup on Wednesday and Thursday was also postponed. And students at Chicago Heights School District 163 went to remote learning Wednesday because of the storm. The mayor's chief of staff, Karen Zaranti, thanked city workers for their efforts. She told the council that city workers had been working round the clock to keep city streets open and safe, and would continue to do so throughout the duration of the storm. Fifth Ward Alderman George Brassey also lauded city workers, saying, "The snowstorm we have experienced in recent days has been terrible, but the City of Chicago Heights Public Works Department has done an excellent job in maintaining the roads during the snowstorm. Each and every resident's request that was submitted to my office was addressed in a quick and efficient fashion." Christopher Bykoskas, 4th Ward Alderman, added that Public Works is working diligently, doing a great job cleaning up the streets. In other business, Zaranti said that the city would be hosting its second Illinois Department of Public Health clinic offering vaccinations and booster shots 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Saturday, February 12 at City Hall. The council also approved an ordinance renewing the city's employee health insurance policy and premium. The city expects to see premiums remain roughly the same. The city's benefits and insurance consultant told the council that he was able to negotiate lower rates with its insurer, Blue Cross/Blue Shield PPO, despite higher prescription drug usage by the 231 employees covered under the policy. Snowstorm forces Chicago Heights to close City Hall.
Before we get to the interview, I just want to tell you about our newest sponsor, Union Signs and Printing. Union Signs and Printing is a union sign shop located near Chicago, Illinois, that specializes in the production of corrugated plastic lawn signs used in applications ranging from political and election usages to unions, schools, and businesses. They also produce a vast array of other products, including American-made, union-printed t-shirts, banners, bio cards, literature, door hangers, business cards, and trifold. Get a hold of Union Signs and Printing at 815-740-1688 or find them on the internet at unionsignsandprinting.com. And don't forget to tell them you heard about their services on the George Brassey podcast. It's so great to welcome author and political consultant Jeff Ward to the podcast. Jeff is the author of So You Want a Local Election? Insights from a former columnist who covered and worked on political campaigns for far too long. Jeff, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Well, George, thank you so much for having me. And it is a long title. It's So You Want to Win a Local Election, but and the book is long too. So you're doing all right.
Jeff, tell the audience a little bit of how far back does your interest in campaigns and politics go?
Well, I've always been interested in politics. Mike Royko used to run newspapers home in grade school to my grandmother, and we'd read Mike Royko together. And whenever something strange happened in the city of Chicago, you knew Mike was going to write about it, and you couldn't wait. So it started back then. But it really took off when I became an opinion columnist for the Sun-Times suburban newspapers at the, I don't know, ripe old age of 44. And then you cover all this stuff and you can't help but note what works, what doesn't work. Most journalists end up advising the candidates they like to some degree. And then when I realized the print media depression, my timing sucked in that regard. Cooking on in 2006, right before that depression, I went to work for the Kane County clerk for a couple of years. And there's nothing like covering elections from the outside and then helping run them from the inside. And it's such a, I love theoretical physics. Anything with that many variables seems to attract me, and campaign managing has certainly been the case.
One thing I've looked over your business's page forward communication, you have a couple methods and strategies that you feel set you apart. Can you talk a little bit about what those are?
Sure. When former Kane County Treasurer Dave Rickett used to say, "You're giving away all our secrets." He was instrumental in helping with the book. But most politicians don't listen. I can tell my secrets out loud, and most candidates will ignore me. But the first one is knowing who will and who won't vote for you. When Willie Smith, the former mayor of San Francisco, was on Politically Incorrect in the 90s, he basically said, if you can't take their money and bleep them, then you don't belong in this game. And that's key. A Republican candidate in Kane County, strong Republicans, as defined by a number of party databases, are going to vote for you no matter what. Strong Democrats will not. It's everyone in the middle that it's anyone who might vote for you that you have to focus on. Sadly, most candidates kind of enjoy preaching to the choir because it tends to be a positive feedback loop. So that's the first one. The other one, knocking on doors is the only thing that ever wins elections. That's it. Third, you got to have a good message. You have to pick a race you can win. And most politicians don't do that. They, George Pradle in Naperville, if we get to that, I'll tell you why George couldn't be beaten. So those things kind of add up. And the book is, as one podcast interviewer said, is kind of brutal. And it is because, to quote the great B.B. King, particularly when it comes to politics, nobody loves you but your mother. And she might be jiving too.
Tell the audience a little bit about that candidate in Naperville. Just for context.
Sure. It's one of my favorite stories, but George Pradle was the mayor of Naperville for 20 years. He could not be beaten. And it's really tough to see first-time candidates full of hope, ready to go. They're good people, and they pick a race they cannot possibly win. George Pradle was mayor of Naperville for 20 years. And considering the size of that city, how dynamic it is, people would spend, I want to say some spend six figures to try to beat George, and they couldn't even come close. You see, George was a police officer in his early days, and he was Naperville's officer friendly. So all the kids that grew up and stayed in Naperville remember George visiting their classroom. The other thing, the last 5K I ran, it was quite some time ago, was in Naperville, and George was passing by and he saw the race organizers passing out awards. He drives up, parks, grabs the awards and starts handing them out, telling people who he is. You can't beat that. So one of the things, if you're going to get in the game, don't run for mayor of Chicago as a Republican. It's not going to work. There's certain county board members out here in Kane County that you just can't beat.
Jeff, would you say a majority of your work revolves around Kane County and the Republican Party of Illinois?
No, the majority does revolve around Kane County. It seems to have worked out that way. Not all of it, but sadly, I've worked for both sides. I helped get Chris Lausen elected. Not that he needed much help. I've helped other Republican candidates. Meanwhile, I got the Democratic Kane County Sheriff Ron Hain and the Democratic State's Attorney Jamie Mosser elected as their campaign managers. The thing is, though, they want, most candidates, not only do they only want a campaign manager that tells them what they want to hear instead of what they need to hear, but they want true believers. The Democratic chairman here in Kane County has been trying to bring me on as their in-house campaign manager, which doesn't terribly appeal to me, but it's a great compliment. But the Democrats can't stand me because I've been critical of them in print as a columnist, and I work for Republicans at times. And the Republicans feel the same way. So I'm one of those rare campaign managers that will happily toil for either side as long as it's for a decent candidate.
Jeff, what makes a good campaign manager, in your opinion?
In my opinion, first, one who I won't take somebody's money if I don't think I can help them. I've had candidates come to me and say, look, I know I can't win this race, but I want to build a name. I want to make a name so I can win the second one. I'm in. It's a candidate that listens to the truth. My good friend John Reeves, who's in the dedication of the book, likes to say that whenever anybody throws their hat into the ring, they automatically forfeit 30% of their brain cells. I think it's closer to 60%. The best candidates can control their ego. George, there's something about running for office that goes back to, Cicero's letters to his little brother, back in the Roman Empire days. And it just seems to kick in our lizard brain. We go nuts only to return to normal right after the campaign. But the best candidate listens to the truth, particularly the numbers, which don't lie. And you'd think, of course, they're going to listen to the numbers. It's all about the numbers. It's only numbers. It's not the case. So while my track record may be about 80% victories, a great part of the reason for that is I will only work for candidates who will listen and who I think I can truly help. And that kind of narrows it down a bit. But the ego thing is critical. Oh, and the other thing is you got to be willing to work. Because again, the way Illinois and most Rust Belt states set it up, George, is you got to go out and knock on doors in the worst weather of the year. COVID has shifted that a little bit, but not much. So, when you realize the most, you could hit 20 doors an hour and it's 10 degrees and icy out, ooh, you better be dedicated, sir.
Jeff, you mentioned that the candidate almost is in a bit of a fervor when they're running for office. The election really can become something that is
insane.
Yeah, I've done it myself in Chicago Heights, and I definitely have all those traits myself. I want to know if your track record is 80%. What do you think you learned from the 20% of campaigns that you lost, or what a candidate could lose or understand by losing a campaign?
Well, what I learned is, never take anything for granted. Some of the, advising some school board candidates for U46 back after our county clerk made a tax error, I mean, the truth was, okay, tax error, the DuPage County portion of the school district got taxed more than it should, but it was going to balance itself out. But the voters don't pay attention to the actual reason. They thought their taxes went through the roof. The latest round was November 3rd was my worst night ever. 1 win and 3 losses. I've never had 2 losses on the same day. And it's not as much, well, I did learn something. I learned that, social media has become much more critical in the COVID era. And when you had 40,000 new voters in Kane County, either coming out to vote for or against Donald Trump, how do you determine that somebody who's never voted before is going to vote? So going forward, I'm going to pay a lot more attention to social media to try to get to those, the voters that rarely vote. And again, that kind of thing only happens, George, when you have a candidate like Donald Trump in the mix, but he may well be coming back. The other thing, you learn which candidates are willing to work and which aren't. And I am relentless. I am like your Jewish mother attorney, in getting candidates to work. So those things I won't relent in. Sometimes candidates make bad decisions. as a couple of them did in leading up to November, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Jeff, talk a little bit about the MOM method.
Again, John Reeves. I've got to give John credit, but it's perfect. Mom, you always need your mom when you're running a political campaign. The first is message. You've got to have a good message. You know, there was Geneva, my hometown, currently. I grew up in Evanston, Illinois. Geneva's still demonstrably Republican. It's changing. But a city council candidate ran with the motto of sustainable government. That's never going to work in Geneva, not in a conservative town. That's, you know, liberal progressive buzzwords, liberal progressive buzzwords. Organization. You have to be somewhat organized. Doesn't mean you have to, you know, develop 30 volunteers, which would be very difficult in any election cycle. But you have to be reasonably organized. You have to have some people willing to help you out, and you have to approach the election, the campaign, in a methodical way. That's the best thing about the book. It's written in an outline format, so you don't have to read the whole thing all the way through. And at 410 pages, that would be virtually impossible, and you'd probably never want to see or, you know, hear of an election again. The third M is money or time. And time can be a good substitute for money, but money, you know, the higher up you go, you know, when you start hitting county chairman or state rep or state senator, money does become critical. However, not, you know, but you can make it up. You can make it up with time. Jamie Mosser, our state's attorney, in the primary, we were outspent 5-1. And yet Jamie hit all 12,500 primary doors, every single one of them. Didn't mean everybody was there and opened the door. Meanwhile, her opponent paid people to walk for him, and we won by 2-1. So, you know, money or time, critical. If you have a really demanding full-time job that requires overtime, George, don't run for office. It's going to be, you know, campaigning takes an inordinate amount of time, right down to the lowest park district or water reclamation district office. So message, organization, and money or time.
Do you think there's any benefit to running with a slate or a group of candidates to help kind of address?
Typically no, because the slate becomes is only as strong as the weakest link, and if one person screws up, it rubs off on all of you. Back, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, the treasurer and the county clerk tried to get the sheriff, then Don Kramer, to kind of run as a ticket and present themselves as a ticket, and Don Kramer was like, "No, I don't want to do that." Well, then there was a nightmare and a hostage situation at Delnor, which you might have heard of, that reflected very, very poorly on the sheriff, and that would have then reflected poorly on the treasurer and the county clerk. However, recently in Elgin, I supported a group of candidates. They did not win in the end. It was an uphill climb. I supported and advised, not professionally, a group of candidates who did run as a slate. And Elgin has become so progressive, and you typically get 11 people running for 3 or 4 city council spots, and you know, you get lost in the mix, and it's a huge advantage for the incumbents. So they ran as a slate, and they came a lot closer than I thought they would. So there are times. They were also almost all experienced candidates and knew what to do and what not to do. But in general, I don't recommend slates. Maybe on the school board if you're tackling a specific issue, but you know, voters. I constantly repeat in the book that the average American voter is just like an off meds ADHD 6th grader coming down from a 3-day sugar and video gaming binge. They don't have long memory spans, so but they do like to dismiss people easily. And if you're, you know, one of 3 candidates on a slate and one of the other ones screws up, it's going to be too easy to dismiss you.
Jeff, how would a candidate who is kind of finds himself in an environment where slates and parties are the norm, how would you suggest they run for office?
You kind of, first of all, typically in those cases, one of the parties is dominant in the county, the city, the school board district, whatever. So, you may be encouraged to run as a Republican in Chicago by people, but it's never going to get you anywhere. So that's the first issue. I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, George? I started going down.
Well, if you're a candidate and you find yourself,
yes. You have to kind of hook up with a countywide party to some degree. It's very rare, particularly in the collar counties, where you have like what they used to call the Combine in Kendall County with Denny Hastert and the name of the attorney friend of his escapes me, but that's, Denny Hastert has been disgraced. That's gone. You still have the Chicago machine, but so then you're kind of relying on the county party structure, and they're not going to give you any money. Very rarely. The Kane County Democrats are actually pretty darn good at supporting their candidates. The Republicans are not, so it's pointless. So running as a Republican in Kane County, since there isn't a lot of party support and Kane County has become partisan, you really have to focus on the numbers to get a Republican to win.
Jeff, tell the audience about 2 books that have been important to you as a person.
2 books. And thank you for warning me about this one. We could have been here for 2 hours while I thought about it. The first one, and I like the movie too, it's Bill Murray's first serious role, was The Razor's Edge by Somerset Maugham. It's the coming of age story about an American ambulance driver in World War I, he gets sent off to the war with all sorts of fanfare. And then he realizes how horrific war really is, and particularly the First World War. The second one is, and this is my all-time favorite, is The Plague by Albert Camus, an existentialist author. And Camus talks about the need to consistently be vigilant. I have quoted the last 2 paragraphs of that book in my columns over and over, and every time I read them, I get goosebumps. I mean, it's particularly, germane in this plague era, with kind of stupidity reigning supreme, in addition to, COVID. So those are the 2 I would probably say are my favorite books.
Jeff, if somebody wanted to pick up the new book or work with you as a candidate, how could they get a hold of you?
Well, the book is available on Amazon in 3 formats. And George, I actually disabled my Amazon device, so it didn't go off when I said the word Amazon. There's 3 levels of the book. The book is really a textbook. And as everyone knows, textbooks are expensive because color books are expensive to print. If you want the full bore, hands-on variety, full color, $99.95. So you want to win a local election on Amazon. If you still prefer the hard copy, but you don't want to pay that much, $49.95 for the monochrome version. And I'll be happy to send you e-versions of the chapters where color matters most. And then, of course, there's the $29.95 Kindle e-version, which probably fits more into most people's budgets. However, a friend of my wife's a teacher, one of her co-teachers was going to run for Congress, bought the book for $100. That's the best $100 I ever spent. I'm not running for Congress. So, everything is relative. And this is like having a campaign manager in your back pocket. My business website is forwardcom.me for Forward Communications. The book site is winalocalelection.com. And if you're interested in reading my twice a week opinion columns, I have continued doing it even since moving on from the Suburban Sun-Times papers. It's www.thefirstward.net, all spelled out.
Jeff Ward, thanks for coming on my podcast.
George, thank you so much. It was a lot of fun.
Take care.
You too.
Help George stay on the Chicago Heights City Council. Go and donate today at tinyurl.com/AldermanGeorge 2023. Need more George? Like his pages on Facebook. Friends of George Brassey, PAC, Fifth Ward Business Alliance, Chicago Heights Bicycle and Pedestrian Resource Center, and the George Brassey Podcast.